Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lock-Cast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on Twitter at MMA LOTN. This week we're going over UFC 252, which is headlined by Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic. It's the rubber match. It's the trilogy. DC goes in there and takes the first matchup. Stipe Miocic comes back and pretty much makes a comeback in that fight itself. Gets the fourth round TKO in the second round over Daniel Cormier. And now here we are, third fight. We're getting both guys at pick 'em odds pretty much. A little bit of money coming in on Daniel Cormier as this fight week is progressing, but pretty much a pick 'em. Close fight, seemingly. I believe that there is value more so on one side, even at the pick 'em odds. But just stay tuned and listen to the podcast, and you guys will know what the fuck I'm talking about. Yeah, it's a solid card. There's only really 8 fights that I care about on this card. The first 3 fights are just strictly filler, and it's kind of annoying-ish. You know what I mean? I don't think the UFC really needs to go out there and like fill these cards just for the sake of filling them. You know what I mean? If these guys aren't ready for the UFC, they're not ready for the UFC. You know, just because we had Magomed Ankalaev and Ion Cutelaba pull out earlier this week because of Cutelaba testing positive for COVID doesn't mean we need to go out there and find 2 guys that probably don't deserve to be in the UFC, and that's not any flack towards Kai Kamaka and Tony Kelly or whoever the fuck he's fighting. But like, you know, you just can't go out there and sign these guys and be like, all right, we had 2 guys fall out, we need to replace that fight. Here are these 2 guys. Like if it's 2 guys from the UFC, like I believe on one of the Fight Island cards, they quickly put together Cody Stamann versus Jimmy Rivera after Frankie Edgar and Pedro Munoz pulled out, I believe it was. I'm cool with that. But 2 guys that are just making their UFC debuts, fuck it. Like, why? Just leave it at 10 fights or 9 fights or whatever the fuck it was going to be. For that reasoning, I am refusing to go over the first 3 fights. So I apologize if you guys came to this podcast to find out about the Daukaus and Porter fight, the Chavez and Brown fight, and obviously the Kamaka and Kelly fight. I'm not wasting my time with those fights. I have no interest in any of those fights. I have enough good spots in the rest of the 8 fights where I feel like there's enough value in those fights that I don't even need to worry about the first 3. So once again, I apologize if you guys came to this podcast looking for advice on those first 3 fights. There are plenty of other cappers out there willing to put their time towards those fights. So I apologize off that. So before we get into this UFC 252 breakdown, I will quickly go over my UFC Vegas 6 campaign, which was another winning event. That's 6 straight winning events, and your boy's hot. Your boy's fucking hot is what I was trying to say. And we're streaking really right now, so I'm hoping that we can keep this momentum going. That's plus 6-ish or at least plus 6-ish units over the last 3 events. Even if we get plus 3 this time, I'm happy with that, but I want to go in there and go for a sweep. So again, let's go over UFC Vegas 6. My dog of the night play, or my first dog of the night play, which was the loss, was minus 0.75 units on Akhmedov to win inside the distance against Chris Weidman. Weidman's durability held up. He looked decent. He still looked bad, so I'm still looking to go out there and fade him next time around, at least depending on who his opposition is. But I was willing to take that 0.75 unit shot at plus 205 to see if Akhmedov could land that bomb and put Weidman out. He was unable to, and I don't regret that bet. I still don't regret it. So minus 0.75, but after that, it was pretty much all winning for the rest of the card. I had 1.5 units at plus 113 on the under 2.5 for Beneil Dariush versus Scott Holtzman. I don't know how long it's going to take for the odds makers to realize that Beneil Dariush is a finish or go get finish type of guy. He's going to always bring the fire. His striking has only looked good ever since his fight with Edson Barboza. He continues to make improvements there, and his willingness to exchange in the fire, it continues to grow. One of these fights, it's going to catch up to him. I thought personally it was going to be Scott Holtzman that was going to be able to catch up to him and put him out here. But Dariush's durability comes through once again. Beautiful finish, and I was just happy to cash the under 2.5 there. So rather than going with the underdog in Scott Holtzman, I chose the under because I believe both guys had finishing capabilities, and that's exactly what we got. Next up, I had a parlay of 1.5 units at plus 147 on Derek Lewis and Darren Stewart. Let's start off with Stewart real quick. I don't think anybody called Darren Stewart winning this fight via submission. I believe the prop was plus 1900, something insane. But I'll take the win any means necessary. I mean, Maki Pitolo looked good a little early, but Darren Stewart was able to get the guillotine finish and a good win for him there. And then Derek Lewis, withstands the why can't I think of I believe it was a neck crank of some sort. A scarf hold, that's what it is. He survives a scarf hold from Alexei Oleinik in that first round because Derek Lewis is just able to survive and endure things that normal men are not able to endure. And then he goes out there and gets that KO early in the second round. Big win for him and establishes himself once again in that top 5 of the heavyweight division. So that cashes for 2.21 units. Happy with that. And then lastly, the lock of the night play. Absolutely atrocious line movement prediction on my end. I go out there and bet 5 units at minus 196 on Gavin Tucker on Monday. Wake up on Tuesday to fucking minus 160. Are you kidding me? Like what? I just did not see what the hell people saw in Justin James. You know what I mean? Other than the fact that he could probably knock out Gavin Tucker in the first round. And that almost happened. Yet Gavin Tucker was able to sustain that, endure that, come back in the second and third round and finally get that finish in that third round. And shout out to all the Patreon members that were able to tail that Gavin Tucker round 3 or even the sub prop that I had suggested and the best bets and props article that I normally drop on the Patreon there. So if you guys aren't on the Patreon, you guys are missing some gems. The week before, we had Derek Brunson in round 3 plus 2,200. Just saying. But yeah, Gavin Tucker, skill for skill, just absolutely blows Justin James out of the water. How the fuck he got down to minus 115 or minus 120, whatever he was. I was so bummed looking at the betting line continuing to close as the days went by on the fight week. So either way, I was dead confident in Gavin Tucker. I was willing to bet him all the way up to minus 250, but I was happy to get that minus 196 line. But even after that, minus 115, minus 120, atrocity. Whoever's betting out James out there to get him down there, shame on you. You know what I mean? He was a plus 260 dog going into that fight against Frank Camacho. And yeah, he took that fight on super short notice, but regardless, you know what I mean, those Vegas fighters are staying ready for their opponents. So even if it was a short notice, it was short notice for Camacho too. And Camacho's no world beater either. So the fact that he went from plus 260 against Camacho to now, pretty much closing as a pick'em against Gavin Tucker, just absolutely ridiculous. That's 3 straight weeks now where like the lock of the night play has had decent action on the opposite side, and pretty unworthy of it in my opinion. The only one I'll give a little bit of credit to is the Mike Grundy one, but even that, if you really looked into that fight, that was an Evloev fight regardless. So yeah, we profit plus 5.7 units on that card. Very, very big event. We keep the ball rolling right into UFC 252, which I already have 5 bets in place for. We got a lock of the night play, 2 dog of the night plays, and a nice little parlay there for you guys. I'm really looking forward to this card. Once again, the best way to get my bets whenever I'm charging the public, just for a reminder for most of you guys, if you guys are new to this podcast, I usually give 3 straight free events, 3 winning events, and then go to paid picks until I hit my next losing event. So whenever I hit my next losing event, I'll go back to or free picks until I hit 3 straight again, and then we're back to paid picks. But right now, 6 event winning streak. So your boys on paid events. The best way to get my picks on Patreon. Best value there as well because you guys also get the best bets and props article, which is a huge hit right now. I give you guys my best thoughts on what the best bet is, which is a straight or an over-under. And then my best prop in terms of the best value and which prop I believe would probably hit the most in that fight at the best odds available. And then also you guys get, as you guys will see with these breakdowns, they were pre-recorded. You guys get those breakdowns as soon as they're recorded. I unhook the camera, hook it up to the laptop, and post it on Patreon ASAP. So instead of having to wait for me to drop the whole thing, you guys get it pretty much right away. All right. That's about it. Let's get into the breakdowns, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Virna Jandiroba versus Felic Herrig. We got minus 320 on Jandiroba, plus 260 on Felic Herrig. Let's start off with Jandiroba, the former strawweight champion over there in Invicta. She came over to the UFC, lost her first fight. It was her first ever pro loss, actually. Against Carla Esparza, which is no slouch, nothing to really hang her head about. Even Carla, former Invicta champion herself. And then she bounced back with a victory over Mallory Martin, where she was able to get the second round rear naked choke. And that was back in December. And now here she is once again fighting Felic Herrig. She makes it pretty easily known. Like, you just need to watch one of her fights to kind of know what to expect from Jandiroba. Yet she just goes in there and still is able to do that. She's still able to go out there, get her opponents down, get the double leg, get her opponents down, and slowly work towards either a submission or just pounding your face in. The damage she was able to do to Mizuki Inoue in that 5-round fight was just insane. You could see the damage on her pretty much from the second round, and it only got worse for pretty much the entire fight. Heavy top pressure, good submission game, solid ground and pound. This is a tough fight for Felic Herrig to come back to. Herrig hasn't fought since UFC 229, which was Khabib Conor, where she had lost a decision to Michelle Waterson. And just a reminder, that was October of 2018. So we're 2 months shy of her being out of the cage for 2 years. And this is not the type of fight you want to come back for. Jandiroba, again, very high level, 15-1, has a ton of submission victories under her belt. And Felic Herrig, she's pretty well versed in jiu-jitsu herself, training under Jeff Kern and Team Kern MMA. She has a couple of submission victories under her belt as well. But this is another level. And again, making a return against a high level opponent like Jandiroba, somebody should speak to her manager and be like, hey, the fuck? I've been out for close to 2 years. Why the hell you got me going in there against a killer? And the odds reflect that. Minus 320, that makes sense. If anything, there's a little bit of value on Jandiroba there. I expect her to be able to get this fight to the ground with not too much difficulty. There is a little bit of a weird glitch or a miscalculation from the UFC stats team in terms of Felic Herrig's takedown defense and takedowns. They say that there was no takedowns landed in the Michelle Waterson fight for Michelle Waterson, and Waterson clearly got her down in that second round. So I'm not sure what the hell they were seeing, and it wasn't like a trip or anything on Felic Herrig's part. It was like a legit throw that Michelle Waterson was able to land on her. The one thing about this fight that there is a little bit of a question mark about is the only time we've really seen Felic Herrig taken down was from a throw or a head and arm, head and arm takedown as well. Jandiroba's seemingly favorite takedown is the double leg. She times it very well. She strikes for a little bit and then waits for the right time to dive for the double leg and really get her opponent down. She is going to be slightly shorter here, albeit like an inch or two. But with that in mind, it's always easier for the person that's slightly smaller to be able to get the takedown. Yeah, sometimes you're going to have to worry about, those taller, lankier fighters that have a little bit better balance, who are able to, kind of like look like Bambi on ice, where they're just looking to get their footing even if their opponent picks them up. But I think Jandiroba will have not too much difficulty with getting Herrig down. Herrig's coming off of, I believe it's an ACL surgery, so she's had a lot of time to go through rehab and get her game back together. But I think Jandiroba will be successful with the takedowns, and I believe she will be successful with maintaining top pressure and potentially working for a submission. The last time we saw Felic Herrig get submitted was actually on The Ultimate Fighter by Random Marcos, and I believe that was, I just want to confirm when that was. That was August of 2014. When she was on The Ultimate Fighter back then. That's obviously what caused her to get eliminated from the tournament. And since then, she's lost to Paige Van Zandt. She's lost to Karolina Kovacevic. She's lost to Michelle Waterson. Sketchy losses. Say what you want about the split decision loss to Karolina. She still lost that fight. Yeah, Jandiroba kind of still looks green on the feet. You know, she doesn't look the most comfortable there. So I definitely would give the edge to Herrig on the feet, but I don't think we're going to see it played out there much. And, you know, Felice Herrig's not like a prolific knockout artist or anything like that, so I don't think Virna needs to worry too much about what's coming at her. The only thing she'll need to worry about, you know, don't get kneed, you know, to oblivion when you're going for a takedown. But outside of that, I think she should be okay. Herrig may have the slight strength advantage here, but after a certain point, the strength doesn't matter when you have, you know, solid technique, solid tenacity, which Virna has, and just the resume that Virna has been able to accrue, I believe, kind of outweighs Felice Herrig's. Biggest win to date on Felice Herrig's record is probably, you know, handing Alexa Grasso her first ever loss. But other than that, you know, Justine Kish, Courtney Casey, Paige Van Zandt. Yeah, I mean, Paige Van Zandt beat her. Albeit, again, back in 2015, it is what it is. But either way, I still think Jandiroba takes this fight with relative ease. I'm not 100% sold on her getting the submission. I do think that's her best path to victory, but I could also see her kind of, winning this fight via decision as well. Herrig's not a complete slouch on the ground. She trains with high-level guys and a high-level team, especially in the jiu-jitsu realm. So I think she'll be able to hold her own, but I don't think that's going to be enough to like get sweeps, get reversals, or even pull off a submission of her own. You know, she doesn't seem to have the most active guard, especially in her fight against Michelle Waterson, where Waterson was able to do a lot of good damage from on top when she did get her down. So I think Jandiroba will show even better, better of a showing or better of a performance than Michelle Waterson did when she was on top of Herrig. And I do truly think that Virna is more than deserving of that minus 320 price tag. And she could be a nice parlay piece if you can find something on the rest of this card to parlay her with. So I do like Virna to win this fight. I'll say by submission. I'm going to say second round submission, but I could absolutely see this going to a decision as well. But I will go second round decision for Virna Jandiroba. Herbert Burns versus Daniel Pineda. We got minus 280 on Herbert Burns and plus 240 for the returning Daniel Pineda. Over under minus 135 for the under, 1.5 plus 115 for the over. 1.5, which is kind of a little surprising to me, a little bit. You know what I mean? I know that Herbert Burns has gotten a bunch of finishes in his last couple fights. Daniel Pineda is the same thing, but I feel like this might be a more drawn-out fight. So the over is probably not that bad of a bet at plus 115. The prop that does catch my eye is Pineda wins by decision, which is plus 630. It's kind of shitty for me to just give you my hand before even giving you guys the breakdown. So let's start off with Herbert Burns first. He's currently riding a 5-fight winning streak. All first round, or 4 of them being first round finishes. His 5th one that I'm talking about was a second round finish. But before that, he was in in ONE FC, where he lost 2 decisions against good guys in terms of records 11-0 and 7-1 going into their respective fights, and Russian guys. The first one, Movlid Kaibulaev, took a more wrestling-based approach. He was able to pretty much nullify the jiu-jitsu game of Herbert Burns and was able to dish damage from on top, and he pretty much rode that fight out. Magomed Idrisov, that fight was mainly a stand-up fight where he was able to, shuck off any of the takedown attempts from Herbert Burns. Herbert Burns was even like pulling the whole Fabricio Verdum, Fedor Emelianenko thing where, he would get hit and then just drop to the ground hoping that Magomed would jump in his guard and kind of play his game. We never really saw that fight get into the jiu-jitsu realm until like the end of the fight with like 40 seconds left where Herbert Burns was able to get his back, but there was just not enough time and the positioning wasn't correct for Herbert Burns to really pull off that rear naked choke or any other submission of that sort. And then, since that fight, he's just been on a complete wrecking streak. He was on the Contender Series where he got a quick triangle choke over Derek Minner in a fight where Minner was close to getting a submission himself. But Burns was able to get out of that and then pull off his own triangle choke, all within 2.5 minutes. Crazy fight. And then Nate Landwehr gets dropped really bad with a knee from the clinch. And we see Herbert Burns pick up a KO victory there. And then last time around, very surprising how easily he was able to dismantle Evan Dunham and get a quick rear naked choke there. The funny thing is, right before recording this breakdown, we got news that Evan Dunham got released from the UFC. The guy just came back from retirement. He probably should have stayed retired. But this time around, Herbert Burns is facing a legitimate, tough test in Daniel Pineda. This is going to be Pineda's 40th pro MMA fight. He's 35 years old, so he's not completely over the hill in terms of his skill level and his peak. He's coming over from the PFL. He did have a little bit of a stint in Bellator as well after his UFC run, as well as Legacy FC before they turned into the LFA. He's coming off of 2-0 contests. That was due to the fact that he tested positive for all of the sauce, apparently. But he had both those fights in the same night, Jeremy Kennedy and Movlid Khaibulaev. Khaibulaev being the guy that gave Herbert Burns his first ever pro MMA loss by riding out on top. Pineda did a good job in terms of setting up a hook right after a beautifully placed leg kick that dropped Movlid, and then he followed up with a bunch of strikes and got the finish that way. And then in the Jeremy Kennedy fight, he did a good job in terms of nullifying Kennedy's takedown attempts, staying on the feet, and then eventually wrapping up a guillotine choke, which he was able to get the tap with. Before that, KO over Trujillo, just had a good, solid run. Even his fight against Georgi Karakhanyan, which was his last loss, that was his last fight in Bellator as well, was doing very well for pretty much 2 full rounds there before Georgi landed a beautiful up kick where we saw Daniel Pineda get cut over his eyebrow. And it did, it was big. Don't get me wrong, that cut was big, but it didn't really seem like it was really screwing up Pineda's vision or anything like that. It was good for it seemed like it was just dripping off to the side, and that whoever that doctor was, that doctor didn't seem like he did any MMA fights in the past before, because he pretty much called it off right away. Pineda obviously wanted to still be in there, and he was doing good damage from on top against Karakhanyan. I find it weird that Karakhanyan was just so, he did go over to Jimmy Smith and the commentators and be like, I got my ass beat up until that point. But then still, he was celebrating, I get it. Well, actually, I don't know about Bellator in terms of their show and win money. I think he just gets a base pay regardless. But in terms of just celebrating getting your ass whooped for 9 minutes and then just hitting an up kick and then winning via stoppage, if it was an up kick and he got the knockout, all right, I would understand it, but you got your ass beat for 9 minutes. Why the fuck you celebrating like you just knocked this guy out and had a great performance? That's not what it should be. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to see his other loss to Emmanuel Sanchez. Just couldn't find the tape on it. We do have it on the tape index. However, Canadians are geo-blocked on the Bellator MMA website, and it was hard for me to find anywhere else where I could find that fight. So, it was a split decision loss, so very close fight. So since his initial UFC run, which was his last fight was UFC 171 back in March of 2014, he could essentially be 11-0. Take away the steroid thing and, say that, the fight with Karakhanyan still kept going, and say that a second judge gave him that Emmanuel Sanchez fight. He could be 11-0, 11 straight victories. But 9-2, which is still very, respectable. It's still a very solid run. And his losses, Emmanuel Sanchez is one of the top guys in Bellator now, so that's not too bad of a loss, I'd say. And then obviously the Karakhanyan thing, I'm going to chalk that up as a W. If you lose via cut, especially in a fight where you're just absolutely dominating the fight, I'm calling it a W. And then again, say what you want about the sauce. He's probably on the sauce in those PFL fights, but did have very dominant performances there. And my main thing here is it doesn't seem like he was in the USADA testing pool for super long. I might be off on that. But with that said, he might be able to get away with something here. Just saying. But I don't want to harp too much on that because I do think he is very talented. He has a strong wrestling game. He has heavy top pressure. He's able to do a lot of damage from on top. And he hasn't been submitted since 2010 against Chas Skelly, which was over 10 years ago. So you got to believe he's gotten better and better since. And you can say the same thing for Herbert Burns in terms of, it's been almost 3 years to the date from his last loss. So maybe in those 3 years, he's been able to make a bit of a change. However, in my opinion, the line is still way too wide for this fight. This line should be, Herbert Burns slight favorite. That's what I think. Daniel Pineda, you guys know that I don't really like to bet on guys that are making their UFC debuts, but Daniel Pineda, for most of you guys are watching this, I'm not sure if you guys were watching the UFC back in the UFC 170 days, but he was a solid prospect. He had some decent wins. What were his losses? Robert Whiteford, Diego Brandao when he wasn't too bad. Unfortunate loss via punches to Antonio Carvalho, who's not that bad. Mike Brown when he was killing shit too, but he did manage to finish Pat Schilling, Mackin Semmerzer, Justin Lawrence, who was actually, he was seen as a highly touted prospect, especially after that Ultimate Fighter. And then, lost to Brandao and Whiteford, and then went on that little bit of a run post-UFC. But here he is back, and I still think he belongs in the UFC. I think there's a huge recency bias with Herbert Burns in terms of just getting those quick first-round finishes in the Contender Series, in the UFC twice, against decent competition. You know what I mean? Evan Dunham a little bit too far over the hill, whereas I think Pineda is still, he hasn't passed over that hill yet. I think he's still very capable of having dominant performances, and I think he could absolutely do that here against Burns. So at minus 285 or minus 300, whatever the fuck Herbert Burns is currently at, what did I say? Minus 280. I saw him in the minus 300-ish range. Seems like the line is closing, rightfully so. Pineda should not be a plus 240 or plus 250 underdog. He should be, closer to plus 120, plus 130, in my opinion. So there is a huge advantage in the implied odds, in my opinion, for Pineda. So I think he's definitely a live dog here. He should not be this big of a dog. I could see him go out there and get the takedowns as long as he survives the first round in terms of not, one, getting knocked out, two, getting submitted, which there is a possibility of that. Burns is a very high level jiu-jitsu player, but I still think that Pineda's experience, his wrestling, his top game, it's good enough for him to be able to survive whatever Herbert Burns is throwing up at him. I think Pineda's a really good underdog here, and I do like him to win. And I think he's going to win by decision. I think he plays it a little bit safe. I think Burns does threaten a bit with the submissions, but Pineda plays it a little bit safe, racks up the rounds, gets the decision victory, and a plus 680 for that prop. That's not that bad of a shot in my opinion. So I will go with Daniel Pineda to win this fight via decision, stamp his return to the UFC. Livinha Hanata Souza versus Ashley Spider Monkey Yoder. Just a fun fact, something that I learned from my first ever Combatosaurus guest, Fernanda Praches. The Inha in these Brazilian names means little. So I'm guessing she's little Livinha or something like that. I don't know, whatever. When this matchup was initially announced, I was dying to get into the tape because I truly believed that I was going to go in here and bet Hanata Souza. I'd coming over from Invicta. She looked really good over there. Her only loss before coming to the UFC was to Angela Hill. That was in a 5-round fight. And then she's suffered her second career loss against Brianna Van Buren last time around. And I believe that the line may look a little bit wider if she didn't lose that fight, or if she just came straight off that Froda fight into this Yoder fight. But I believe with that loss, the line is a little bit closer than it probably would have been. Van Buren brings this weird style of, not really a weird style, but a pretty efficient style. She has good hands. She has good movement, good takedowns, being able to get in and out of positions without really eating too much damage, at least in that fight against Souza. But Souza, we kind of know what her game is. Like, she wants to, she is most successful when she's able to get her opponents down and initiate her jiu-jitsu. But when it gets a little bit tricky against, opponents that have slightly, just as good jiu-jitsu or better, or even just a notch below, the fight gets a little bit closer than it should be, especially when you're talking to a girl like Souza, who, seemingly is a high level opponent or a high level fighter. She's 15-2, I believe that is her 13-2 coming into this fight with Ashley Yoder. And I had huge hopes for her when she came into the UFC. Like, she was a minus 1,000 favorite or something, or minus 1,200 favorite against Alex Chambers, and rightfully so. She went in there and dusted her in a minute and 21 seconds with the guillotine choke. But when you see some of these fights, they're actually a little bit closer than you would expect. Her opponents do have some success in terms of threatening with some submissions, and I don't mean success in terms of ending up tapping Souza or anything like that, but they get her into compromising positions that maybe another fighter would be able to finish some of these positions. She does have a good jiu-jitsu game, but again, she is susceptible to getting reversed and swept and allowing opponents to throw up triangles, throw up armbar attempts, and she does a decent job of getting out of them and getting her position back. But in this fight against Yoder, man, Yoder is a little bit slick. You don't let her record fool you. She's 7-5. She's coming off a loss to Randa Marcos last time around, which was a very, very close fight. Her loss, or her both wins over Siri Kondo and Amanda Cooper, probably seemed a little bit closer than it should have been. She probably should have wrecked those opponents a little bit more. But the fight against Mackenzie Dern, she did a really good job in terms of keeping Dern off of her, keeping it on the feet. But Dern did a really good job in terms of clinching her. And with the threat of the takedown there, I feel like it really threw Yoder off a little bit. In this fight against Souza, though, I believe Yoder might have the slightly better stand-up striking. Like, both of them aren't anything special when it comes to the striking realm. For Souza, she doesn't really throw in too many combinations. She has a little bit of power. She has dropped opponents in the past. Most notably, I'm completely fucking up her name, Ayaka Hamasaki. Beautiful finish in that fight. But I believe the reach and the height of Yoder can definitely play a little bit of a factor in this fight. So Souza's coming into this fight 5'3", 63 inches, and we got 5'7" and 66.5 inches for Yoder reach. I just don't know what type of fight we're going to see Yoder implement here. Obviously in the Dern fight, she wanted to keep it on the feet. We all know that Dern has super high level grappling, and even when Dern did get Yoder's back, Yoder did a really good job in terms of defending that rear naked choke. She did a really good job with 2-on-1 in terms of peeling off the hand that was supposed to be there to tighten the choke. But she did a decent job on the feet, and I think here she should be able to kind of keep Souza on the end of her punches. She has decent takedown defense as well, which was kind of surprising when I got into the tape. But I do believe the judo of Souza would be able to allow her to complete some of these takedowns. But again, once it gets to the ground, it's kind of concerning the amount of times we've seen Souza kind of reverse, swept, put into compromising positions. And Yoder, the Spider Monkey nickname is, she lives up to it. She's really, really crafty on the ground. I think a lot of wiki cappers are out there now kind of just fading Yoder due to the fact that she has a 7-5 record. But once you really dig into the tape, you see that this woman is quite talented and quite skilled. Again, especially when it comes down to that the jiu-jitsu game. I don't see either girl going out there and submitting the other one. I think this one will go to a decision, but I believe it's going to be a super close fight. I could see it going back and forth, and if that's how it's going to play out, you would think that the line would reflect that a little bit more. Minus 165 for Souza is a little bit steep in my opinion. With that said, at plus 145, I'm not too compelled to go out there and play Yoder either. I do believe she is the value side here, so if you do want to make a bet, I think Yoder is the side to go. Obviously, if you want to play the over 2.5, good luck playing that juice at minus 300 or whatever the fuck it's at. But I think this fight is much closer than the odds dictate right now. So I'll go with Yoder to win this fight by decision, but by like a hair. It's going to be a super close fight. I kind of hope it does play it on the ground so that we can see a little bit of these questions answered a little bit more in terms of Souza's jiu-jitsu, being able to keep top position and get submissions, and then Yoder, to get a win like Livinha, Hanata Souza under her belt, very, very impressive. So I think she is capable of doing that. I'm just not the most confident in actually betting her myself, but I do like Yoder to win this fight by decision, and I think she'll be successful in terms of getting the better positions and kind of controlling Souza in some of these spots. But I believe it will be very close. I went into this fight or went into the research of this fight wanting to bet Souza, but come out on the other side, and I'm picking Yoder now, and I'm kind of questioning Souza's skill at this point. So taking Yoder to win this fight by decision, very, very close fight. But yeah, you got to go with the dog in this situation. So I'm going to go with Ashley Yoder to win this fight by decision. Jim Miller versus Vinc Pichel. We got -125 on Pichel, +105 on Jim Miller. And we also have +110 on the under 2.5 for this fight. Let's start off with Jim Miller. He has a victory over Roosevelt Roberts last time around in a fight where I'm kicking myself for not taking the plus money on Jim Miller. And say what you want about, that kind of being a fluke in terms of the way that Roosevelt Roberts tripped and how Jim Miller ended up on top of him and then eventually got that armbar. It is what it is. It's MMA. The threat was there. We knew that Jim Miller was the much better grappler, much better jiu-jitsu artist as well. And it played out. It happened. Just like Alexei Oleinik ended up on top of Mark Hunt in that fight when not a lot of people thought that was going to happen. It fucking happened. So big win for Jim Miller there. Before that, he got completely starched by Scott Holtzman. But one thing you can almost guarantee with Jim Miller, at least more so recently as well, is that most of his fights are not going the distance. He's going out there, he's getting the finish, or he's the one getting finished. And I think in this fight with Vinc Pichel, there's a high likelihood of another finish. Which side it's going to be, I'm not 100% sure. I got to give the jiu-jitsu advantage to Jim Miller here. He is the more crafty guy on the ground. He has a lot more submission victories under his belt. Vinc Pichel, strong grappler himself too, but maybe not as much in the jiu-jitsu realm, at least comparatively to Jim Miller. Pichel himself, in his last fight, actually had a victory over Roosevelt Roberts. That was back in June of last year, so he's taken just over a year off. He was scheduled to fight Alexander Yakovlev back in November. Pichel had to withdraw due to injury, but now here he is back against the vet in Jim Miller. And even though Pichel has 14 fights, the guy's 37 years old. The guy's been around for a while, at least in terms of competing, but not actually fighting. I mean? Like he's been around the game, but just has, had issues in terms of getting himself into the cage. It's weird to think that Jim Miller is actually the younger guy here too. So I do believe that Pichel is a stronger guy. I believe he'll have the slight advantage when it comes to the striking. But I do believe that Pichel is going to want to try to get this fight to the ground and try to implement his top pressure. I don't think that's going to be smart of him, though. I think that Jim Miller will be able to catch something from the bottom and early. Or I could also see these guys fucking swinging for the fences. I mean, Jim Miller has a little bit of power in his hands. We saw him rock Clay Guida before finishing him with a submission. And Vinc Pichel, we know he can crack as well, too. I expect, when Jim Miller is kind of that ingredient, I always like to look for it in, betting a fight when it goes the under. And I believe Pichel, he's not the perfect ingredient in terms of making sure the under hits, but I think that Jim Miller could definitely bring it out of him, whether it's him just getting cracked himself or, putting himself in a position to get finished. I don't have a strong lean on either side here. I could see absolutely, Pichel taking down Jim Miller, kind of controlling him in that first round and maybe getting a second or third round ground and pound finish, or Jim Miller just, cracking Pichel himself and then following up with some sort of submission, like a club and sub type of scenario. I'm not confident in either side, though. The only thing I am confident is in the under. I do think that one of these guys will get the finish. I think it's either a Pichel TKO or a Jim Miller submission. Not completely confident on either side, which is why the line is kind of, around the pick a mark. It seems like it's starting to float a little bit more so to Pichel's side, and I can understand that. People like to fade Jim Miller, especially this late into his career, and the guy holds like the most appearances in the UFC, so I kind of get it. The wear and tear is definitely there. And Vinc Pichel, even though he's slightly older, he does have less miles on his body. But I do like I'm going to take Miller. I think Miller pulls off the submission here. I think he does hit and hurt Vinc Pichel, and then eventually pulls off whether a rear naked choke or some sort of arm triangle choke. But I do believe that Miller will get the victory. Again, not confident enough to take the plus money on him, but I do think the under 2.5 is not that bad at that plus 110 mark. So not the deepest or craziest breakdown here for this fight, but, and again, it did come together pretty late. I think they only announced this fight like last week, so that's something else to take into consideration here. Jim Miller had a pretty quick fight against Roosevelt Roberts, and it wasn't that long ago either. That was June 20th, so just under 2 months later, Jim Miller's back in action. Third fight of 2020, wants to stay busy, good for him. And then also there is a little bit of ring rust possibility for Vinc Pichel after him being out for as long as he was. So I'm going to take Jim Miller to win this fight by a first round submission. But the confidence level is kind of low here. But I will take Miller by first round submission. John Dodson versus Merab Dvalishvili. We got minus 220 on Merab and plus 180 on Dodson. And this line, first it went down and started to close a little bit, and now it's starting to widen once again. I remember seeing Dodson around the plus 150-ish range. Yeah, plus 150 roughly, and now he's up to plus 180, plus 195 in a couple places. I wouldn't be surprised to see him at plus 200 come fight time. So let's start off with John, actually. He's coming off a victory over Nathaniel Wood. Nathaniel Wood was seeming to have the upper hand in that fight, just quicker to the strike. He was using his range very well. He was using his height very well. His 1-2, especially his right hand, though, just right down the middle was beautiful. It's so quick. He's able to cover a lot of distance with it. And then he's able to, just clinch up with John Dodson and have a little bit of success there. The good thing about John Dodson, though, is he's very slimy. Like he's able to get out of spots. He's very hard to keep down. Pretty much any fighter that gets him down, he gets himself right back up. But one thing you can always guarantee John Dodson will bring or actually two things that you can guarantee whenever you see a John Dodson fight is his speed and his power. It always translates. And yeah, that was his first knockout since Manny Gambirian back in 2016. Since then, he's fought guys at the likes of John Lineker, Eddie Wineland, Marlon Moraes, Pedro Munoz, Jimmy Rivera, Piotr Jan, and Nathaniel Wood. Obviously knocking out Nathaniel Wood last time around. Now, the love people are giving John Dodson and some of the people that are trying to debunk the love that John Dodson is getting is trying to bring into the narrative that John Dodson, getting the KO in his last fight against Nathaniel Wood, that it's playing a little bit of recency bias. And I don't necessarily agree with that. It could be a little bit of recency bias with other people, but for me specifically, I'm not really taking that. Like obviously it helps that he was able to go out there and knock out a prospect in Nathaniel Wood, but it's more so the styles here. One thing you see in Merab's fights is that he gets hit, and he gets hit like he's quite hittable. Yeah, he moves a lot. Yeah, he gets a lot of takedowns. Yeah, he has endless cardio. But the one thing you can't neglect is the fact that he gets hit. And if you get a guy that hits as hard as John Dodson, I like my chances at that plus 200-ish line. And I did see that the inside the distance is around plus 400, which is even more intriguing. This line should be a little bit closer, in my opinion. I'd be fine with Merab around that minus 150, minus 140 range. But people love Merab, and I'm one of those people. I love Merab too, and he's won me a lot of money in his past couple fights. He was juiced in some of them, but he was deserving it in those. But stylistically, there are guys ranked above John Dodson that I would probably bet Merab Dvalishvili in. But this fight is just a little bit different. It's just a little bit more risky, in my opinion, if you're a Merab backer. We know that he's going to get the takedowns, and we know that John Dodson is probably going to get right back up. Say what you want about Merab Dvalishvili landing whatever, fucking 20 plus takedowns a fight. That means that his opponent got up 19 or 20 or 21 times. He doesn't do a good job of controlling his opponents when they're on the ground, which is why he's able to get endless takedowns. And sure, that might be like the Cain Velasquez approach, where just keep taking a guy down and he's going to just tire himself out getting back to his feet. yeah, I kind of understand that. I kind of get that. But John Dodson never really shown crazy amounts of cardio issues in the past. The guy's able to carry his power throughout his fights. All three, in the third round, he takes out Nathaniel Wood. Drops Petr Yan as well. That's something that's kind of a feather in his cap too, considering that a lot of people will say that Petr Yan is a much better striker than Merab Dvalishvili. So, especially striking defense, you got to give it a little bit. You got to definitely give the edge to Petr Yan over Merab Dvalishvili. So, I'm expecting Merab to go out there and just take down Dodson endlessly. But I'm expecting at a certain point that he's going to slip up. John Dodson's going to land that bomb, and it's going to be night-night for Mr. Merab. You guys know my style though. Like if I believe that the knockout is really the only way for an opponent to win, I normally either fade them or I just pass on the fight totally. But with Dodson, and again this matchup with Merab, I feel like he can find that button. And even if it's just a poke on the inside the distance at that plus 400ish line, it is definitely worth it. If Merab had a little bit better striking defense, I probably wouldn't be as heavy on this, or I wouldn't be as as confident per se, or as strong on this position. But yeah, like he's there to be hit. John Dodson still has the speed. He still has the power. And yeah, I like Dodson here. Again, you're kind of stacking all your chips on him, hoping to get the KO. I believe that there is enough of an opening there for him to get that KO. But all in all, like it's hard for me to see how Dodson's going to go out there and win a decision of any kind. So, you can either go Merab via decision or Dodson inside the distance. I'm feeling a little bit more so on the John Dodson side. So I'm going to go with John Dodson to win this fight by a second round KO. Or maybe even third round KO. Not 100% sure, but I do believe he gets it done. And I do like that inside the distance price tag. So yeah, I'm going to go with Dodson to win this fight by second round KO. Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Junior Dos Santos. We got minus 135 on Jairzinho and plus 150 on Junior Dos Santos. This fight, the odds have started to close closer and closer. Actually, it looks like Jairzinho opened around minus 125, got bet down to about minus 150, and now he's closing back in around that minus 130, minus 135 range. Close fight, but after further investigation, I feel like the favorite, Jairzinho Rozenstruik, is rightfully the favorite, and could possibly say he deserves to be a bigger of a favorite. So let's break it down a little bit. The first and foremost, the over-under is 1.5, minus 105 for the over, minus 115 for the under. I could see this going both ways, so I probably won't touch that. But let's start off with Junior Dos Santos. Most recently, he got knocked out by Curtis Blades back in January. And then before that, obviously, got deaded by Francis Ngannou. And then he had 3 solid victories over Blagoy Ivanov, Tai Tuivasa, and Derek Lewis. So what's the difference between those guys that he beat and the guys that he lost? Those guys that he beat, kind of like punching bags almost. You know what I mean? Like Junior Dos Santos is a solid technical striker, moves well for a heavyweight. Boxing is on point. But those guys, Blagoy Ivanov, Tai Tuivasa, and Derek Lewis, they're not as technically sound as Junior, nor do they have as good footwork. And we know that Tai Tuivasa, came into the UFC with a little bit of hype, but got quickly extinguished after he lost a couple fights, most notably to Sergey Spivak. But Dos Santos in those fights, you can even go back to the Ben Rothwell fight that he won back in 2016. Dos Santos looked on point, and he looks so much better when he fights those guys. That's why I believe that the line is as close as it is. Once he fights guys that are a little bit, have more power or are technically just as good or have abilities to set traps with other parts of the game, it kind of throws Junior Dos Santos off. And I think that this is the first legit pure striker that Junior Dos Santos is going up against, since Alistair Overeem, who knocked him out back in 2015. But I think the most effective way for Junior Dos Santos to win this fight is probably to try to get it to the ground and maybe just grind out Jairzinho. But as we've seen in Jairzinho's fight against Alistair Overeem, he's been working on his get-up game. Alistair Overeem got him down in that first round, but after that was able to keep it on the feet for the majority of that fight, but did a really good job in terms of getting back to his feet. And then obviously we know how that fight ended. And yeah, Jairzinho was about 4 seconds away from losing that fight, but the type of fight that Overeem brought to Rozenstruik, which was a clinch-heavy game up against the fence, solid knees, stay active enough so the referee doesn't split them up. That's not Junior Dos Santos' game. Junior's game is like sticking and moving, staying on his bicycle. Not really a clinch fighter. Doesn't really go for takedowns. Here's a statistic for you guys. He's only attempted one takedown since his first fight with Stipe Miocic, which was back in 2014. He attempted a takedown on Blagojevic, was unsuccessful there. But yeah, he's only attempted one takedown. So you can't really go into this fight thinking that, okay, he's going to go out there and he's going to try to take Jairzinho down and try to ride him out. We have no evidence of that. Like, he's fought guys in the past where, even after he's been knocked out and people are thinking that he's chinny, after he got knocked out by Alistair Overeem, after he got knocked out by Stipe Miocic, well, let's go back. After he got knocked out by Overeem, he went into that Rothwell fight, and a lot of people are like, all right, Rothwell has some ridiculous just grunt power. He could probably go out there and knock Junior Dos Santos out. What did Dos Santos do? He goes out there and just picks apart Ben Rothwell for 5 rounds. I believe that was the main event. For 5 rounds, he just picks him apart, pretty much just beats up his body, and really doesn't allow Ben Rothwell to get started. Stipe Miocic goes out there and gets knocked out by Stipe Miocic. So what do we think he's going to do in the Blagojevic fight, the Tai Tuivasa fight, and the Derek Lewis fights? He's probably going to want to take these fights to the ground, right, and try to beat them that way? No. He goes out there and tries to, box them up and finish them that way. And he was very successful with that against Blagoy, against Tai, and then even in the Derek Lewis fight, I believe it came out afterwards that Derek Lewis just had these horrible back issues that was really just screwing him up. But even if he didn't have those back issues, I still feel like Junior was going to be able to dance circles around him. As long as he didn't get hit by some crazy bomb, he would be able to dance circles around him, beat him up to the body, and then outpoint him if he didn't get that finish. And then obviously Francis Ngannou goes out there and knocks him out. Curtis Blaydes, that was a fight fairly even in the first round, but I feel like the threat of the takedown from Curtis Blaydes really had Junior Dos Santos kind of on the tip of his toes and didn't really allow him to kind of go out there and strike. Blaydes did shoot for a couple of takedowns there. JDS showed that his takedown defense is still good, but I think that Curtis really wasn't, trying for those takedowns as much as you thought he would, just to kind of get it into Junior's head that, all right, yeah, your scouting report said that I'm going to be going for takedowns. Yeah, it's there, but I'm also going to be throwing hands at you and throwing kicks at you to kind of keep you on your toes. And the way Curtis Blaydes set up that finish, an absolute thing of beauty. Just feints the takedown, and you kind of see it. Junior Dos Santos already had it implanted in his brain that whenever Curtis Blaydes is going to go for a takedown, I'm going to launch this rear uppercut, and hopefully it lands on him as he's on the way in, and then that should give me the victory, right? Wrong. Curtis Blaydes does a great job of feinting the takedown and then coming back with a 1-2 to completely stun Junior Dos Santos, and then he follows up with a barrage of shots that ends up getting him the TKO victory. But when guys are able to get JDS overthinking a little bit, and I think that Jairzinho is going to do a really good job in terms of setting up shots on the feet, leg kicks. He's clearly will be the better overall striker. He does a lot better with his striking defense as well too. One thing that has waned in Junior Dos Santos' career has been his striking defense. He still keeps his hands down, still thinks he has a granite chin for some fucking reason. But Jairzinho, on the other hand, we know how much power this guy is able to generate, how much power this guy is able to put on his opponents. And I don't think that Dos Santos' chin and durability is going to be able to hold up here. Now, people can go back and be like, all right, Jairzinho just got absolutely rocked and wrecked by Francis Ngannou back in May. true, but I don't think that we're going to see Junior Dos Santos land a good enough shot or something even close to what Francis was able to land. So I think Jairzinho will be fine in terms of durability and being able to eat whatever JDS throws his way. But I think that Jairzinho is just going to be the slightly faster guy. His counters are going to be on point. I feel like we're going to see him, pretty much clip JDS and get him out of there. I'm just not sure whether it's going to be over 1.5 or under 1.5, which is why I'm not totally comfortable with playing the total here. But I like Jairzinho on this. I think he's just the more calculated, educated striker here. Kind of is on the rise still, even though he got halted by Francis Ngannou last time around. He's 32 years old. JDS, I believe he's getting up there in age a little bit. He's 36 now, so just on the tail end of his peak. And obviously in the heavyweight division, 36 is probably your peak anyway. But just due to the type of resume that we've seen Junior Dos Santos put together over his last several fights, I just think that this is a bad matchup for him. And there's that one picture going out and around about Junior Dos Santos where he's just looking shredded as shit, just posing like this, and you just see every ab, every muscle kind of being strained by him. Y'all gotta just cut it out with with drooling over that. The physical condition of a fighter, minus what we saw with Jake Collier a couple of weeks ago, that's not going to translate in the fight. They could look in phenomenal shape, but it's got to translate in the fight. And I think that that does not show us that Junior Dos Santos has corrected his striking defense deficiencies. It just shows us that he's in good shape. That's it. It's not going to say that his chin is stronger. Show me him show me him bringing Francis Ngannou in and just absolutely wrecking him once again. Or show me him, eating shots from another big striker who's not holding back. And then I'll believe it. If he's able to go out there for these 15 minutes and stand with Jairzinho Rozenstruik, eat all the shots that Jairzinho has to throw at him, and is still coming out on top. Well, even if he goes to a decision after eating all those shots, I'll still give him, I'll say his stock goes up. The questions about Junior Dos Santos have been around his chin, but also his striking defense. But again, I truly believe he's outgunned here against Jairzinho Rozenstruik, who in my opinion is the much more decorated striker, has the power, has the slight youth advantage, if you want to call it that. Even his MMA miles, they're a lot less than what Junior Dos Santos has gone through so far. This ain't the JDS of the Cain Velasquez trilogies. Or then again, he looked pretty bad in those. But I just mean of that era. JDS back in those days was probably one of the best heavyweights of all time. But now he's just on the tail end of his career. This is a bad matchup for him. He needs kind of another punching bag type of guy that he can just go out there and just box up for 15 minutes or 25 minutes if you want to throw him in a main event spot. But Jairzinho should have all the success here, from the leg kicks to the boxing, just to the overall game. And again, if we go out there and see Junior Dos Santos pull out his wrestling singlet and try to get this fight to the ground, I think that we've seen the improvements from Rozenstruik to be able to get back to his feet, to allow him to go back to his striking and really put Junior Dos Santos into trouble. So I'm going with Rozenstruik to win this fight. I would say by second round KO. But yeah, it's tough to pick against Ngannou, but he's really dropped the ball. And it all comes down to styles for him. And this is not a friendly style for him. So I think that we'll see Rozenstruik go out there and get the finish. And the odds that he's currently at, minus 135, minus 140, not bad. I think that now that we are seeing a little bit of money coming in on JDS and seeing people kind of buy into that picture that he fucking released a couple weeks ago, if you wait it out a little bit, you might be able to get a better price on Rozenstruik. So I'll be keeping my eye on the betting line, but I do like Rozenstruik to win this fight by second round KO. What's the KO prop anyway? Let's see. Let's get fancy here. Rozenstruik via TKO is minus 105. That's to be expected. Minus 108 for him to win inside the distance. What's Rozenstruik in round 2? Plus 475. Not bad. You guys know I've been on the ball with these round betting methods and stuff. So maybe round 2, Rozenstruik, after he really gets comfortable, starts to get the timing of JDS down, puts him out. Totally possible. So I'll take Rozenstruik to win this fight via second round KO. Unfortunately for my boy Ngannou, though. Rozenstruik round 2 KO. Marlon Vera versus Sugar Sean O'Malley. We got minus 325 on O'Malley. We got plus 265 on Chito Vera. The over-under is at 2.5, and we got plus 110 on the under. Let's start off with the Sugar Show. He's coming off a very impressive victory over Eddie Wineland last time around, where he set up a beautiful trap with an uppercut feint and transitioned that right into a right straight, and it put Eddie Wineland's lights completely out. It was probably one of the more masterful performances when it comes down to like the nitty gritty of the striking techniques, especially from Sean O'Malley, who, you know, he's mainly seen as like a wild striker, likes to throw a lot of spinning stuff, but the amount of volume he's able to generate and his output makes it a lot harder for opponents to really get a read on him and allow them to, you know, try to find a way to slow him down and have more success against him. I think out of all the fighters that he's fought to this point in the UFC, Terrion Ware is probably the one that had the most success. He really stayed in his face. I believe he won that second round. It was close, but he won that second round. But that was just, you know, plain and simple, staying in O'Malley's face, not really giving him space to actually, you know, pull off the spinning stuff or have the room that he needs to dictate the pace. Marlon Vera, very slow starter. We know that, you know, for some reason he loves going for those standing arm triangle chokes and isn't even scared in terms of pulling his opponent back into his guard to try to pull that off. And it hasn't really worked out for him in the UFC to this point, but for some reason he still continues to attack it. I highly doubt we'll see him try to attack it here against O'Malley. I do believe that Vera thinks that he'll have the advantage on the ground, and I tend to believe that, but I don't think it's anything like ridiculously over the top where O'Malley's going to completely struggle if this fight does hit the ground. I do believe O'Malley has the advantage on the feet in terms of just being technically the more intelligent fighter, you know, good fight IQ, good understanding of how to like use his distance, how to cut angles. One thing that I love that he likes to do in a lot of his fights is he kind of like feints the double jab, comes in with his right hand because it covers so much fucking space, and he does very well in terms of landing that and then ducking and just cutting an angle to get out of the way to avoid any of the shots coming you know, in return as a counter. He's hit and landed on so many guys with that shot. You know, it was the one that actually put Kashkanian, Kashakian, sorry, Alfred Kashakian on the Contender Series. That's the one that really hurt him. And then obviously he followed up with other shots to get the finish in that fight. But O'Malley just, I kind of like his style. Like this fight does kind of give me Shabazian and Brunson vibes, but not to the extent where I believe that O'Malley has this one lingering issue, which is his cardio. That's one thing that I feel like has been harped on a lot during this fight week, at least what I've been seeing from a lot of other people. But I don't believe it's that much of an issue. Like, it's not Shabazian level. You know what I mean? Like, Shabazian suck and win completely, like, gas tank on E when it comes to the third round. O'Malley did pretty well against Terrion Ware in that third round, even though he lost that second round and it seemed like the tide was shifting. O'Malley did a really good job in terms of staying in there. Throwing output seemed a little tired, but again was still throwing, getting out of the way of big shots. And with Vera, I don't think O'Malley really needs to worry about like one big shot putting him out or anything like that. I think Vera's chances of winning this fight is staying in O'Malley's face, kind of like the Terrion Ware approach, but I feel like Vera's a little bit more lethal and violent in those exchanges when they're in the pocket. I feel like it's going to be hard for Vera to really track O'Malley down and keep him against the cage or keep him cornered in a spot. And obviously with this being a smaller cage, it kind of may favor Vera a little bit more. But I think that O'Malley has a good understanding of his footwork, his distance management, and ability to get in and out of bad situations. Going into this, I really wanted to find a legitimate reason to fade Sean O'Malley here. I do still believe, even after finishing the tape, that the line is a little bit too wide. Minus 325, I'm not 100% comfortable with that. Even with parlaying that, I just don't feel comfortable with it. You know what I mean? I feel like this is a legitimate test for Sean O'Malley. Wyland was a solid test, but I feel like he's a little bit more over the hill, whereas Marlon Vera seems to be really coming into his own. And even though he's coming off a loss to Song Yadong, you could easily make a case that he won that fight. And if that did go his way, I believe he'd be on a 6-fight winning streak right now. 6 fights, 5 of them all being finishes as well too. So very, very impressive on his end. I love his fighter mentality. The guy just he thrives in the fire. Like there's an exchange, I believe it was against Yadong or Ewell, where they're just up against the cage. His opponent had their back on the cage. They're throwing bombs, and what's Marlon Vera doing? Not really just throwing bombs, but throwing elbows, like throwing elbows with intention. And that was very impressive. I found that to be something that's a shining spot for Marlon Vera in terms of just being so engaging when it comes to a firefight. I find it hard to believe that Sean O'Malley is going to stay in the pocket and trade with Vera in that type of instance. But I truly believe that we'll see O'Malley land a beautiful shot against Marlon Vera to put him out in the first round. With that said, if he's not able to do that, I still believe he'll have success in that second round. But in the third round, it really seems like Marlon Vera turns things on. And I feel like the odds aren't out for it yet for Vera to win inside round 3. But that might... Oh, wow, look at that. That's got to be a first. As I'm recording, they drop the fucking props. So let's see what they drop Marlon Vera in the third round. Vera wins in round 3 plus 2025. Not a bad hedge, in my opinion. If Vera is able to pull it off, he might get that late finish. Again, he just has this switch that turns on when the fight gets a little bit later. Like even in his fight against Nohela Hernandez, very flat first round, second round kind of flat too until he just turns the switch on, lands a couple good shots on Hernandez, and then eventually gets the finish. You know, maybe it comes down to the third round here for Vera. O'Malley's going to have to throw a lot to keep Vera on the outside. He throws a lot of good kicks, so that should help him in terms of keeping Vera on the outside and keeping him in a position and at a distance for him to land his flashy movements or his flashy techniques. But eventually I think it's going to come down to that right hand where he's able to cover so much distance, land on Vera, get out of the way of any big shots. But I think that might be the night punch for O'Malley. So I do believe he wins in the first round with O'Malley in round 1. Plus 325, not a bad bet. You know what I mean? I don't mind O'Malley plus 325 in round 1. I truly believe he'll be able to land on Vera. But if it does get into the third round, it might get a little bit sketchy, which is why I wouldn't mind hedging with that Vera in round 3 plus 2025. But yeah, I am going to take O'Malley to win this fight by first round knockout. But I just think the odds are a little bit too wide. Main event time, we got Daniel Cormier going up against Stipe Miocic to try to regain the heavyweight title and ride off in the sunset as the baddest man on the planet. We got minus 115 for Daniel Cormier, minus 105 for Stipe Miocic. This fight's pretty much out of pick'em, and I kind of get it. You know, they split the series 1-1, but when it comes down to skill, I'm kind of surprised that the line is where it's at. So last time around, or both times around actually, I did bet Daniel Cormier. I was very happy the first time around to get roughly around that plus 2 whatever mark it was, plus 240 I think it was. I can't remember at this point in time. And then last time around we got him at a slightly closer of a number. I got him at in the minus 120, minus 130 range, I believe it was. And now this time around, we're getting a dead straight pick 'em. You know, people are thinking that they split the fights, so it's bound to be a close fight, and it could be a close fight. But I expect the experience, the fight IQ, and the true skills to come out of Daniel Cormier to really put a stamp on this trilogy and put a stamp on a great career of his. So we know he's the better wrestler. We know he's the more credentialed wrestler. We know he has, experience at 205, experience at heavyweight as well. The only reason he really went down to 205 was due to his best friend, Cain Velasquez, pretty much wrecking the heavyweight division at the time that Daniel Cormier came into the UFC. So without wanting to have to face each other, Cormier decides to go down to 205, gets the title. Say what you want about how he got it and the whole John Jones situation, but he became champion. He became double champion after knocking out Stipe Miocic. Defends the title against Derek Lewis, and that's a fight that I want to touch on in this breakdown. And then goes out there and obviously loses to Stipe last time around due to just poor fight IQ. Like the fact that he's kind of talked about it, the fact that he's addressed it shows he knows that he came into that fight with a pretty bad game plan, or at least just did not execute the game plan as well as he should have, or probably not even the game plan that he had in mind. So let's talk about the Derek Lewis fight. The only reason I bring this fight up, and I know that Stipe Miocic and Derek Lewis are two completely different fighters, but the one thing that I do want to draw your attention to in that fight is kind of the ease in which Daniel Cormier had with keeping Derek Lewis down. There were certain times that Lewis was able to get back up, but Cormier did a good job in terms of chain wrestling and keeping him down. We don't often see Derek Lewis be held down that much. You know what I mean? Derek Lewis, he has his, no technique in terms of how to get up, but he just fucking does it. It's like the Black Beast get up. Like whenever he decides he wants to get up, he just gets up. But he had a little bit of issues there with Cormier in terms of doing that. And it's not often that we see, Lewis get submitted either. And Cormier did a good job in terms of waiting for the right time to sink in that rear naked choke, got the rear naked choke, and pretty much got that done with ASAP. Now let's switch that with when Miocic fought Francis Ngannou. I believe Lewis, just due to his sheer strength and power and just brute strength, is able to get up much easier than a Francis Ngannou would. Miocic got him down pretty easily in most of his fights, but had a little bit of trouble in terms of keeping him there. I do believe we did see Miocic's gas tank show issues in that Ngannou fight, and I feel like he kind of rectified it in the last Cormier fight. But with that said, I think it was kind of the pacing of the fight where we saw Stipe kind of gas out or show signs of gassing in his Francis Ngannou fight, where he's forced to wrestle, go up against an opposition where it's where he's really just trying to dodge the big shots from Francis Ngannou, close the distance, get the fight to the ground, and try to hold Francis Ngannou down. That's where I kind of think that we saw the issues for Miocic and his gas tank. Cormier, on the other hand, in his last fight with Miocic, I feel like we saw a little bit of gas tank issues from him too, but I feel like it was due to the fact that it was enough. The fight played out in a style that he's not as used to or as familiar with, which is mainly in the striking realm. We've never really seen DC go out there and go strike for strike with an opponent for that. We're used to him kind of going out there and relying on his wrestling, relying on his grappling, relying on his clinch game to get the victories in most of his fights. We didn't really see much of that outside of the first round, and it's mystifying to me that we didn't really even see him go for that takedown more often in the second, third, and fourth round after he was so successful with it in that first round. He did a lot of good work in that first round with the top control. And why he abandoned that, absolutely no idea. Even in the corners, we could hear, Bob Cook and Javier Mendez talking about, this is an MMA fight. Use your boxing, use your wrestling, get the takedowns. But he did none of that. He's just trying to catch Miocic's hands and try to throw counters. And yeah, he looked good. He did land some good shots. He had a higher output. It seemed like his shots were doing a lot more damage. I'm not sure if that's just due to Miocic having being easier to cut and being easier to show superficial damage. We didn't see much damage on Cormier's face. But then when, Miocic, it seemed like Cormier was trying to take that round 4 off a little bit. And that's where Miocic really started to pick up the volume, especially to the body. And that's what opened up the KO for him. I feel like we won't see Cormier allow that to happen once again. I feel like he's such an intelligent fighter and has great fight IQ that he knows where he slipped up and where he has his advantages in this fight. And I believe we'll see him, especially in his swan song, go out there and have a pretty much a flawless performance where he gets Miocic down pretty much every single round up until he finishes him. And once we see Miocic start to suck wind a little bit due to having to fight a more grapple-heavy approach from Cormier, we'll see Cormier finish this fight later in the fight, or in the later rounds, probably third, fourth, or fifth round. Yeah, I just think Cormier has, crushing top pressure. He does a really good job in terms of keeping his opponents down. He's already done it to Miocic before, so we know it can be done. And people can say what they want about the age of Cormier. Miocic is up there in age too, but luckily for Cormier, these in the heavyweight divisions, the age just does not matter as much. I mean, you can still have skill, and I do believe that Cormier is probably one of the most skilled fighters ever in the heavyweight division. Uh, Pretty much side by side with this guy, Cain Velasquez. And, it's, I don't know why it's just been so irritating for me to hear everybody try to, defend Miocic and say, oh, he's the greatest heavyweight of all time. And, resume wise and record wise, I get it. I can see that. But I still feel like Cain Velasquez is probably the best heavyweight of all time. I think he would have had fun with Stipe in there. And I feel like if he goes with that, if Cormier takes that Velasquez type approach in this fight with Miocic, which he's totally capable of, he should be able to go out there and absolutely mollywop Stipe Miocic. I don't feel like we see there's much of an issue in terms of Daniel Cormier's chin. He ate a lot of big shots from Stipe Miocic. It was really the body shot that started to throw off Cormier first, really brought his hands down, brought his guard down, and Stipe Miocic landed a beautiful one to really hurt Cormier, have him stumble up against the cage. But I don't believe that Cormier has chin issues. It was just a mixture of exhaustion, the beautiful body shots on Stipe Miocic's end, and then just Cormier just crumpling pretty much. I don't think that we'll see that this time around. I truly believe we'll see a masterclass performance from Cormier, and I'm looking forward to it, kind of dispelling this image of Miocic that people have. And Miocic, kind of like perfect time, perfect place. I mean, he was kind of one of the younger guys in the heavyweight division, even though he's up there in age. But he was one of the younger guys going out there and dusting some of these guys that were kind of a little bit past their prime. The JDSs, the Fabricio Verdum going in there with the completely stupid ass game plan and getting knocked the fuck out back at UFC 193. Let's see, what was Stipe's other fights? Obviously, I believe, it was the Overeem fight that got him. No, not the Overeem fight. It was the Arlovski fight that got him the title shot. Beats Verdum, knocks out Overeem, who's had just bad chin issues, as we always know. Junior Dos Santos, past his prime. Francis Ngannou, that was a solid win. I'll give him that. Other than the fact that, as you guys have been following me for a while, you guys know I know that Francis Ngannou is pretty much just a one-round fighter, or a very one-dimensional fighter. If he's not able to land that bomb and he goes to 3 rounds or goes to a decision, we kind of know what to expect, as we saw in the Derek Lewis and the Stipe Miocic fight. So decent win in terms of being able to absorb the shots from Francis Ngannou. But again, Ngannou not as talented or not as skilled as Daniel Cormier. Loses to Cormier, beats Cormier, and now here we are again for his 3rd straight fight against Daniel Cormier. Yeah, I love Cormier in all aspects here. I think we'll see him go to the wrestling a little bit more in this fight. Stipe is no crazy Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy, and I believe the pressure, the wrestling, the pace is going to be a little bit too much for Stipe. And once we see this fight play out in the wrestling and the grappling realm a little bit more than we did in that second fight, you guys will see that Cormier will be a lot more comfortable there. I don't think we'll see him as gassed or looking as exhausted or tired as he was in the 3rd and 4th round of their last fight. But we will see Miocic sucking one a little bit more in that 3rd, 4th, and possibly 5th round if he gets there. But I'm still taking Cormier to win this fight. I think, and again, last thing, great hands by Cormier too. Again, as careless as it seemed, he was landing a lot of good combinations on Miocic. He seemed to be the quicker guy. The knockout in the first fight seemed to catch Miocic a little bit off guard, and we saw Miocic, eat a lot of big shots from Cormier second time around, and he was able to eat them and pretty much keep coming forward. But this time around, it's going to be the grappling, it's going to be the wearing and tearing that Cormier put Stipe through for those 3 or 4 rounds. But I truly believe we see Daniel Cormier go out there and get the 4th round TKO via GNP, ground and pound. And yeah, he sails off into the sunset as one of the baddest men of all time. In my opinion, we got Cormier. You know what? I got like 1A and 1B, and we're talking strictly UFC. I don't want to get into this whole Fedor talk in terms of pride and MMA in general, but strictly UFC. They may not hold the records or anything like that. Kane was obviously very much troubled with injuries throughout his career, but I got 1A and 1B, Cormier and Velasquez, and then you got to put Stipe under that, and then maybe we can get into the older guys like Coleman and those guys, but that's just a discussion for a later time. But last thing I will say about this fight, it is very promising and encouraging to see Cormier. He put out that picture of him with the gray beard Cain Velasquez, which is such a weird look and just weird to see. And then Luke Rockhold, as well, as we mainly know, he's been training most recently in Florida, but the fact that he's coming back up there to San Jose to help out his dear friend Daniel Cormier, it really shows that he's dialed in. He really wants to get this W. And yeah, again, I think it comes down to fight IQ and just skill for skill. I believe Cormier is the much better fighter here. And the fact that we're getting him at even money, I believe we'll see him look like a minus 250 or minus 300 favorite once this fight is all said and done. So I'll go with Daniel Cormier to win this fight by 4th round TKO. Wouldn't mind a little pinch here and there at the Cormier in round 3, round 4, round 5. If you guys got odds to that, go for that. I would say, but I'm gonna go with Cormier to win this fight via TKO round 4. And yeah, perfect swan song for one of the greatest fighters of all time. And that's a wrap on the breakdowns. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys may be able to decipher which bets I ended up going for. If not, you guys can find the bets over on Patreon or my website or on my Bet MMA tips profile. All the links you can find in the description below. So make sure you guys check that out. And last thing I want to plug before I get out of here, the tape index. If you guys do your own due diligence in terms of doing your research yourself, the tape index saves you a bunch of time. I'd say more than 90% of MMA bettors have, kind of do it part-time and have a full-time job, have a family and all that. The tape index is there to save you a bunch of time. We have everything that you need to prepare for every upcoming MMA event. Dana White Contender Series, UFC, Bellator, and PFL, if they ever come back. All the links you guys need on one page. So all you have to do is bookmark the tape index, go to the tape index page, and then you have everything that you need to, from fight links, direct fight links, so you don't have to search the web and waste your time with that. Direct links to their Tapology, to their Instagram, as well as their stats page. So it saves a bunch of time. Huge time saver. And very, very cheap. $3.99 a month. If you bet at least $5 units, that's a steal and a half, considering you guys get pretty much every major MMA event in that tape index. So just wanted to plug that. All right. Check out the website, MMALOTN.ca. Check out the Patreon, patreon.com/MMALOTN. And then also my Bet MMA tips. Everything, again, is linked in the description below. And I am, as of this recording, I'm 7 subscribers away from 1,000. So if you guys haven't hit that subscribe button yet, please do. I hope to achieve that before the end of this event. And man, that would be a huge milestone. I'd be doing this podcast for nearly 2 years now. And the steady growth has been very encouraging and very inspiring. And I hope to continue to bring you guys this podcast on a weekly or fight weekly basis. And I can't wait to do this shit full time. And getting to that 1,000 subscriber mark really, really helps your boy out. So I greatly appreciate you guys clicking that if you guys haven't yet. All right. That's it. I'm done. I'm going to shut the fuck up now. Let's win these bets this weekend. Good luck and gamble responsibly.